welcome this evening in this cold. You braved this cold to come and learn about a really fantastic topic which is so timely, and that is of immigration. I don't think there's a day, and maybe not an hour, that is not a topic on one of our news stations, and certainly in the national and international news. So it is very timely that we're talking about that this evening. And we have a absolutely fantastic speaker, Reverend Dr. Leo Sanchez from Concordia Seminary, and a wonderful panel, including former Vice President of Concordia Seminary, Doug Rutt, Reverend Dr. Stanish Stanley from Christian Friends of New Americans, and Amy Ziegler, who's the Community Outreach Coordinator for CFNA. And CFNA is very dear to this congregation, and I want to just begin this whole evening by recognizing what I think are really pioneers in the immigration efforts in our area, certainly, and that is the founders of CFNA, and that's Alan and Carol Buckman. Could you just stand up? I'm not sure where I see you there, but a round of applause for them. Thank you. So, you know, our sort of theme song for this whole series has been the story of the Good Samaritan. And I think it's worthwhile, as we talk about this idea of immigration, for us to think again of that story and what the Lord might be saying to us. Who is the immigrant? Who is the foreigner in that story? The Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is, in fact, the person who is different in that story. And what he brings to us is a story of the goodness, of the beauty, of the care of neighbor that perhaps we might think about as we see the sort of bashing of immigrants to our wonderful country, founded on all of us as being immigrant families. So there is really the thought of great good and great mercy that comes out of that story for us.
It's my privilege to introduce to you our very good friend, Professor Dr. Reverend Leopoldo Sanchez, Leo Sanchez for us. You can read about him in the papers that you were given. There's a small bio of what he does right now. I should add that he was born in Chile, South America, and raised in Panama. So he speaks good Spanish. He came here for high school, right? He came here for high school, and the rest is history. He stayed here. Besides being our friend, we have something else in common, like many of us here. We are all immigrants. We came from different countries, we came from different cultures to this land who has blessed us immensely and who has allowed us to be a blessing to many others, especially back in our countries. So with that spirit, I would like to introduce to you or to present to you Dr. Leopoldo Sanchez, Leo Sanchez. Please welcome him, and then let's listen to him.
Gracias, Beatriz.
Buena suerte.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Don't worry, the rest is going to be in English. Thank you for your kind hospitality. I have been to this church many times throughout the years, and I have always found a welcoming church in this place. And over the years, I've gotten to know a number of you, so I feel like I'm at home in some ways. So thank you for your kind invitation, and thank you for coming tonight on a cold day. Not exactly the type of weather we had growing up in Panama, but still God's good day, and so thank you for being here. So today, I am going to talk about immigration, but through the eyes of my own experience as an immigrant coming into the United States and being welcomed by a church family in Iowa. Yes, where there are Lutherans. And that part of the journey, to just kind of give you a window into the many ways in which the church can be a welcoming community to migrants, and a way to think about how migrants also become a blessing to the church. I see that in my own story, and I'll share some of that with you today. Now, let me share some numbers first to give you kind of a broad perspective on migration worldwide. According to the latest statistics, the United Nations Refugee Agency estimates that 117.3 million people in the world have been forcibly displaced from their homes, and this could be due to conflict, persecution, or violence. Of those 117.3 million displaced people, about 73.5 million are internally displaced, meaning that they go from one place to another within the same country, where they can find maybe a safer place to live. Of the 117.3 million, 36.4 million are refugees. So refugees usually go to another country, then they spend time, often significant time, in a refugee camp before they come into some kind of refugee resettlement process, which might then lead them to live more permanently in another country. And 8.4 of those 117.3 million are asylum seekers. These are people who come to an actual port of entry of a country. Could be a neighboring country, but it could be also another country across the sea or whatever, where they seek asylum. And there are a number of reasons for that, usually some kind of persecution or violence. It could be of a religious nature, it could be of a political nature, and so on. Now, these numbers do not include other migrants who might be leaving their countries due to various push and pull factors. And those include things like family unification, maybe poverty, failing governments, gang violence, better economic, educational opportunities, and things of that sort. Those migrants are not included in these numbers, okay? Because they do not fit the definition of a refugee or an asylum seeker. So, having said that, there are a lot of people on the move in the world today. Let me give you some other statistics. These are from the Pew Research Center. And if you account for people on the move living outside of their country of origin, the latest statistics from the Pew estimate that more than 280 million people, or 3.6% of the population worldwide, are migrants. And the majority of them are Christian, 47% of all migrants. Most of these are from Mexico migrating into the United States. And that will be followed by Muslims, about 29% of that number, with most of them migrating from Syria into countries in the Middle East, North Africa region, places like Saudi Arabia or something like that. So that's a little bit of the big picture. We live at a time when we have the highest number of people on the move. And the presence of migrant neighbors among us, like family members in some cases, or members of the church, co-workers, classmates, members of our communities, means that the church has some work to do in terms of reflecting on what our scriptures and what our Lutheran tradition might have to say about migrant neighbors. So we have a great opportunity to do ministry with migrants among us. So that's a little bit of the statistics. Now, here's a picture of me. Now, I looked kind of a lot thinner back then. This is a picture of me at Concordia Seminary in the president's room teaching an intensive course for the Center for Hispanic Studies. And these students, this was probably taken about 20 years ago. We have students here from Mexico and Peru and Cuba. And over the years, I've had students from Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Nicaragua, Guatemala. I can just keep going. And it's wonderful. One of the great privileges of teaching at Concordia Seminary is that I've gotten to teach both in English and in Spanish quite regularly. And so many of these students are now serving their communities. It's been a wonderful thing. And in many ways, they are the ones who inspire me to think theologically about immigration. This wasn't my particular area of study when I went through graduate school. I was focusing more on the Holy Spirit. But having students who were first-generation immigrants and who serve immigrant communities really got me into the world of the migrant. I want you to meet another family. This is the Delamuth family. And yes, that guy on the far, whatever you're looking at, left or right, that's me. The guy who doesn't look like the Delamuths. And next to me is Larry. I used to call him Dad. Pat in the middle, or Mom in the U.S. And then the three kids, Mike, Dave. I used to hang out with Dave quite a bit. Went to high school together. And then Michelle with the cat. And I forgot what the name of the cat was. I think it was Patches. The Delamuth family and the stranger in their midst. That picture is about 34 years old. All the kids are married. My wife and I just got back from Iowa. Williamsburg, Iowa. Ever seen that? Population 5,000, Highway 80, close to Amana colonies. And we just got back from the funeral of Dad Larry. So we were there with the family, spent some time with them. And the funeral took place at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, Williamsburg, Iowa, where I was confirmed a Lutheran on my senior year of high school. I was a foreign exchange student at the Delamuth's home. Went to high school there and everything. And I lived with them for over 2 years in Williamsburg, Iowa, as a foreign exchange student. And in Williamsburg, Iowa, I was a stranger. I remember, we Latinos, in many of our countries, we have this custom that when you meet someone, you give them a kiss on the cheek. And, they didn't have that custom in Williamsburg, Iowa. So I remember Mike, the eldest son, brought a whole bunch of friends of his to the house, and they all brought their girlfriends with them, And he was so excited for them to get to know this guy from Panama who was living with them. So I just went down the line and started kissing every single girlfriend that the farmers brought over, and they were looking at me like, what's this guy doing? And I knew at that time that I was not from Williamsburg, Iowa. And the other thing was, one time, Pat was making pumpkin pie. Well, we never had pumpkin pie in Panama, so I didn't know what pumpkin pie was supposed to taste like. So she put a big piece of pumpkin pie in front of me, put a big piece of pumpkin pie in front of Dad Larry. And you have to understand that Larry was a man of very few words. He was one of these stoic German farmers, didn't say much. How are you doing, Larry? Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. Things going well, Larry? Yep. Not a lot of like full sentences and stuff like that. But that day, when we got that pumpkin pie, I took the first bite. I didn't know what it was supposed to taste like. And then I asked Pat if she had any honey that I could put on the pie. She said, honey? Why? What's the problem? And then about the same time, I look at Larry, and Larry puts this face like, and she looks at him and says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he said, "This pie tastes like fill in the blank." And that's the most words I ever heard come out of Larry's mouth. I didn't know that it wasn't supposed to be sweet. She forgot to put sugar or whatever. And she was so ashamed, she took pride in her cooking. She grabbed that pie and just threw it in the garbage, So I knew I was a stranger. And it's funny because then when I would ask for sugar for the coffee, they thought I was weird. Because they don't put sugar in their tea, sugar for the tea. They don't put sugar in their tea in Iowa. So I wasn't one of them, and I knew that. But I was welcome. I was welcomed warmly into their home. I think I've heard that somewhere before. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. But Lord, when did we welcome you? Whatever you did for the least of these, you did to me. So how you look at people who are different depends on what set of eyes you see them through. Do we look at strangers through the eyes of faith and Christ's compassion, or do we look at them through a different set of eyes? Now, when I went through seminary, we never talked about, what do Lutherans think about migrants and exiles and refugees and that kind of thing. It never came up in the classroom. So I started working with immigrants, and all of a sudden these questions come up. Some years ago, I ran into Luther's commentaries on Genesis, or his lectures on Genesis. And in Genesis 18, you have the story of Abraham welcoming the three strangers at Mamre. And Luther uses this story to talk about what it means to be hospitable towards exiles coming into German lands at the time. Many of them fleeing during the times of the Reformation for reasons of religion. And so they were fleeing into the lands of Frederick the Magnanimous, where Luther lived at the time that he was writing the Genesis lectures. And this was towards the end of his life. And in his lectures on Genesis, Luther reflects on Abraham's hospitality to the three strangers. And Luther teaches us that Abraham welcomed them because he saw the strangers with the eyes of faith. Luther explains that when we look at strangers through our physical eyes, sometimes it says the eyes of the sinful flesh, strangers become an obstacle to us, a hindrance to us. But when we look at them through the inner eyes of faith, says Luther, we see that God is coming to us in the strangers. If we look at strangers with the eyes of faith, then we see them as God's gift to us. If we see them with the eyes of the sinful flesh, they are obstacles to us. The Delamuths saw me with the eyes of faith. The Delamuths looked at me through the eyes of faith as a neighbor whom God has sent in their midst to share life with them. So we rejoice in God's gift of each other, and we form strong familial bonds, but also strong fellowship. I did not only find a home in their household, but I found a home in their church. I was catechized a Lutheran, eventually became, a pastor in the Lutheran church. I want to introduce you to the Schaefers, also from Williamsburg, Iowa. Grandpa and Grandma Schaefer. Now, these are mom and dad. So Mom Pat in the U.S., her parents, the Schaefers, Grandma and Grandpa. Now, they're now with the Lord. Grandma died during COVID, and Grandpa died many years before that. When I was already a pastor, St. Paul's Lutheran Church celebrated their 100th anniversary, and they asked me to come and preach. I think I'm the only child of that congregation who went into the ministry. So they're very, proud of having their child, spiritual child, come in and do the preaching. So I remember preaching there, and that was the first time that I actually publicly thanked the Schaeffers and the Delamuths for all, their hospitality. And I publicly did that. And again, Grandpa Schaeffer, stoic German farmer, but he was cracking a tear that day. I was telling stories about how I knew that I was really a member of the family when I was put on the, toilet cleaning rotation. I was like, yeah, I'm a member of the family. Or wake up at 5 a.m. to clean the pigsty. Yikes. The smell of money. Grandpa Schaefer got really emotional that day. I always remember that. They were so proud to have in their family a pastor in the Lutheran church. When Grandpa Schaefer died, the story is that someone asked Grandma Schaefer if Leo should preach, because you see Leo is a Lutheran pastor. And Grandma Schaefer said, no, Leo's not going to preach, because Leo is a grandson. He's going to be a pallbearer with the rest of the grandchildren. The Delamuths and the Schaeffers did not engage this stranger by explaining to me their beliefs. They simply lived according to their beliefs. They didn't talk to me about hospitality. They were simply hospitable. And I found that compelling and inviting. One of my favorite Jesus meets stranger stories is from Luke 17. We're told that Jesus walked along the border between Samaria and Galilee. We often think very negatively about borders, right? Borders are suspect places. Jesus walks where nobody else wants to walk, along that border between Samaria and Galilee. He meets the 10 lepers. Only one of them comes back and gives thanks, the one who was healed. And he was, we're told, a foreigner. The one least likely, according to our human standards, who might come back and thank Jesus is the one who comes back. Only one of them returned. Praise God in a loud voice, threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was the Samaritan leper. There's the Samaritan again, John. The stranger. Jesus asked, has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Christ saw this stranger with eyes of compassion, and through faith in him, made the stranger a member of God's family. You've probably seen this artwork from a Russian iconographer, Rublev. It's an icon of the Trinity. And in the Christian tradition, the three strangers in the Genesis 18 story are often portrayed as an Old Testament manifestation of the Trinity, the three who appeared to Abraham. And Luther is aware of this interpretation of the three strangers, and he uses it to teach Christians in his day to welcome exiles fleeing into German lands, many of whom were escaping religious persecution, but also economic hardship in some cases. And Luther says when Christians welcome these strangers, they welcome Christ himself who comes in these strangers. Luther calls the church to be like an Abraham in the world. He has this beautiful language where he says, the church is the house of Abraham in the world. Beautiful image, isn't it? You start thinking, how can our churches be the house of Abraham in a world filled with exiles? Not only in a world filled with exiles, in places like Williamsburg, Iowa, or places like St. Louis, Missouri. And we'll hear some examples of that in a little bit. How can we be the house of Abraham in the world? According to Luther, Abraham is an example of hospitality. Luther is picking up from an early church tradition because many of the church fathers in the ancient church often portray Abraham as an example of hospitality. So Luther is picking up from that tradition, and he describes Abraham's empathy for exiles because Abraham himself was a migrant. Luther says, Abraham often endured the rigors of the weather in the open country and under the sky. He was often troubled by hunger, often by thirst. For the term exile includes countless hardships and perils. And this experience, says Luther, enabled Abraham to be gentle, kind, and generous towards exiles. And so he welcomes the strangers at Mamre. And from such experience, says Luther, Abraham learned this rule, that he who receives a brother who is in exile because of the word receives God himself in the person of such a brother. So not only was Abraham a sojourner, called to a land not his own, but he also embodies Yahweh's concern for, care for, and hospitality towards people who were often seen as vulnerable in the Old Testament, like the widows, the orphans, the poor, and the aliens. The church is the house of Abraham in the world. Another way of putting this is the church is like an Abraham in the world. When the church is hospitable in the world, this becomes a sort of mark of the church. People recognize the Church of Christ for the hospitality that they show others. Now, Lutherans like to talk about marks of the church. You have probably heard this language before. Usually what we mean by that is that you can recognize the church on earth where the gospel is preached and the sacraments are rightly administered. Those are the primary marks of the church. But then Luther adds some other marks that flow from that, like bearing the cross for a neighbor, like praying or interceding for a neighbor, like being the house of Abraham in the world. These two are marks of the church where people can say, look at how they love each other, and look at how they love those who are different from them. Maybe we want to be part of that. That looks really different. So Abraham gives us a beautiful moral example of hospitality. Luther says there is hospitality wherever the church is, and those who want to be true members of the church practice this hospitality. Luther calls the church to be the house of Abraham in the world, a sort of refuge of the exiles and the poor. And Luther asked his own prince, Frederick the Magnanimous, to be merciful to exiles. Luther is judicious. On the one hand, he wants to prioritize the needs of citizens and residents who already live within the German lands of Frederick. And yet, on the other hand, he wants to say, but we should also be welcoming to the extent that we are able to do so. Those fleeing persecution because of the word, and it's interesting to think that you have the majority of people on the move in the world coming from some kind of Christian background. And then also there might be those who face hardships. And Luther says there might be some kind of little domain of a godly prince in which there can be room for such people. So he sort of appeals with the government, you know. At that time in the world of Christendom, he's talking to a Christian prince and so on. And so you have that concern. Sometimes he's critical of different sectors of society. He doesn't feel that they assist enough those who have legitimate need. And so sometimes Luther gets mad, but whoever heard of Luther and get mad at anybody, right? Yeah, this happens quite often. And Luther has a sense that Christians might disagree on how the government should deal with foreigners, exiles, refugees, and so on. You're always going to find disagreement among Christians on temporal matters. But there's one thing that all Christians should agree on, and that is the mission of the church. And the mission of the church is to proclaim the gospel to all people and to extend the works of mercy to all people. And that includes also all immigrants. The church is called to practice, Luther writes, works of mercy, feed the hungry and the thirsty, to receive exiles hospitably, to comfort prisoners, and to visit the sick. All right, so this is another picture of CHS, or Center for Hispanic Studies students. You have a number of students who are receiving their first calls into the ministry from a number of nations. We have deaconess students and we have pastoral students here. And these are immigrants who found not only a country to call home, but a Lutheran church to call home. And now they are, with their congregation, the houses of Abraham in their communities. And for this, we give thanks. My prayer is that the Spirit of God will stir our hearts to see strangers, exiles, and migrants among us with the eyes of faith, as neighbors for whom Christ died and rose again, to bring them into His kingdom, into His church, perhaps even into this church, into the church of all nations. Who knows? Such hospitality might just bear wonderful fruit. Such hospitality might bring about lasting bonds like the ones I have been blessed to enjoy with the Delamuth family over the years. That Lutheran family of unassuming farmers from Williamsburg, Iowa. Who knows? Such hospitality might bring blessings to our churches. Who knows? Maybe your next pastor here might be someone from another nation. Maybe an immigrant. Maybe the son of an immigrant. Who knows? Maybe such hospitality might engender other fruits, like perhaps inviting to your speaker series somebody last name Sanchez. Thank you. Go Hawkeyes!
Thank you, Leo. Let me have the panelists come up, and we're going to start entertaining questions. Dr. Rudd, Dr. Stanley, and Amy, come forth. Let me just ask, as our panelists are gathering, Leo, why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult for us who seem to feel that we have inherited the American dream and the American experience? Why is it so difficult for us to welcome people who are different?
Part of the answer to that, I think, is that we just like to hang out with people who are like us. I think that's a natural, normal thing. People who maybe look the same way, speak the same way, talk, walk the same way. This is what I call Facebook love. You know, Facebook, where you like the people you like, and so like, and there's something about human nature where we're naturally attracted to people who have qualities that we like to see in ourselves. And so Luther is well aware of this, by the way. Luther wrote a treatise, not a treatise, but a set of theses or affirmations or statements called the Heidelberg Disputation. And this was a year after the 95 Theses were posted on the church gate in Wittenberg. And in the Heidelberg Disputation, Luther makes a distinction between two types of love: human love and then divine love. And he says human love is the love of affinity. is when you like people who are kind of like you, or they have, again, qualities that you want to see in yourself or reflected in them and so on. And Luther says that love is fine. I mean, I hope that you love people you like. There's nothing wrong with that per se. You know? But then Luther says, but for Christians, there's another type of love, which is the love that we have received by God through Jesus Christ. That's a different type of love, because that's the love that loves people who are sinners, and people who are poor, and people who might be unlovable and unlikable in the eyes of the world. Christ loves those people. And that is divine love. He calls that the love of the cross. And that kind of love is one where you're not seeking to get something from somebody, you know. But it's the kind of love where you bestow upon others, primarily those who are not like you, bestow upon them the blessings that God has given you, and begin to form a relationship with them. That's very difficult. I think Luther recognizes that, you know. But he calls that the love of the cross that Christ works in us. So, you know, it's one of those things where we pray for that kind of love, that we might love others even as Christ has loved us. So Christ doesn't call the righteous into his kingdom, the righteous. He calls sinners into his kingdom. See? He calls the unlikable and the unlovable of the world into his kingdom. People like that Samaritan leper, you know. So I think the question is, and nothing wrong with Facebook love, but remember that there are other neighbors, you know, whom we are also called to love, and it might be more difficult to love them, but God can help us.
Let me reintroduce everybody. Professor Rutt, retired now, right? But probably still finding good things to do. And Stanish Stanley, the current executive director of Christian Friends of New Americans, and Amy Ziegler, who is the outreach community coordinator for CFNA. So B's going to be on one side with a microphone. When you speak, if you have questions, please hold it up to your face, not down at your belly button, so that we can hear what you have to say. So let's entertain some questions. Anyone? Maybe to get us started, Stanish and Amy, tell us a little bit about CFNA, what they do in the community, so because there might be some people unfamiliar with that.
Okay. Maybe I'll go first.
Please.
Because I might be the most nervous of this group over here. As said, I'm Pastor Standish, and I have been working with Christian Friends of New Americans since 2012. As a volunteer, 2013 onwards, more seriously with after-school tutoring and various things. What CFNA does is, for me, it is, in simple terms, an outreach to the nations that has come to our place here in St. Louis. So I myself connect very well with what Dr. Sanchez has mentioned. My own story is that I'm from India. I came here as an immigrant myself, came to study at the seminary, and then ended up working at CFNA because of the big bosses there, Dr. Buckman and Mrs. Buckman, with whom I worked for so many years. What I have seen CFNA do is reach out to people who are refugees and immigrants, serve them, bless them, and witness to them in Christ's name. In simple, that's just as simple as that. We do various things. We do activities like ministry activities that reaches out to people to serve them and connect with them and witness to them as well. So ESL classes, driver's education, after-school tutoring, community engagement is an important piece as well with programming that we have. We have health and wellness screenings and sewing classes for women. So these are some of the things that we do to make those connections and build relationships with people, as Sir has been pointing out as well. As I said, it's a simple ministry in many ways. If you just think of the fact that I belong to the LCMS tradition because some LCMS missionaries decided to come over to my place in 1895 and share the gospel. That's the story of my church, and that's the story of my tradition. That's who I am. During those days and times, people had to come to our place through ship. The first missionary, Nather, came through a ship, 3, 4, 5 months in the ocean to reach our place and to share the gospel. But the cool thing about CFNA is that it is possible for Lutheran believers to be in mission today. We just have to get into a car and drive into St. Louis City, and you will meet the nations there. And so that's what CFNA does. It makes it possible for the average Lutheran believer, not somebody who has to be trained and go through seminary and all that, to reach people like me back home in India. But you just have to hop into a car and come over 30 minutes down the highway, and you are at the place where the nations are. And so that's what the ministry of CFNA has made possible.
Great, thank you. Amy, how can people get involved? How can any of us lay people get involved with what CFNA is doing here in St. Louis?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions to answer. Always have an answer. Your church specifically, you guys came and were involved with us last spring in an event we called Build-A-Bed. And we had built in 3 different tiers of involvement. One could be just donating products for a household of families for like the bedding and the little nighttime stories and a snuggly for a child. But then some of you, including both of your pastors, came downstairs here at your church and sawed and sanded, and we made a big mess of your lower level cafeteria area and created beds that were bunk beds for families that have 11 children in a 2.5 bedroom house or apartment even. And we got kids off the floor, and we had walkable spaces because of your church. And then the third portion to that event was people coming and driving all of these bed frames into the city and building them in the homes and sitting down and being welcomed. And ironically, here we're doing this thing for our friends, and yet they're sitting down with us, serving us tea and asking us to stay longer and talk. And they were the ones welcoming us, the stranger in their home. So super cool. It was a great time. But then we have other things. We have always ways that you can involve yourself financially, prayerfully, and then also through activities. We have after-school tutoring and driving classes that are a weekly thing, and you will usually be paired with one person and just get to know them deeply and well, and it's a beautiful relationship. And then we have other things like in 2 weeks we have our Christmas community nights that we're having, where we're going to be giving every household products like cleaning products and personal care items, things that are not on food and government programs, things that would cost the family a lot more money to have. And we give away those things, but then we also hang out afterwards, and we're going to be having some Christmas music this year and just conversation spaces and stuff. And any one of you could come and do that just for one night, 2 to 3 hours, get a taste of what we do, see what we're up to. And then in the spring, we're going to do something again with your church, and then also with Webster Gardens. We're kind of having this trifecta of programming. We're going to, instead of building beds this year, we're going to be building garden beds because we have this new property that we are in. And one of the new possibilities there is we're going to be building garden beds, and the students of CCLS are going to start growing little plants and then come plant them in the spring. And then both your church and Webster Gardens is planning to come to us quarterly on Saturdays to volunteer to just pull weeds and kind of take care of some of the little lawn maintenance items that we have in the new space that we're in. So there's 100 more ways, but those are some in a bullet point. Yeah.
Thanks. I was looking at flipping between, at workout this morning, flipping between CNN and Fox and NBC and noticing the ICE raids, particularly in Minneapolis, going on. Are we dealing with any of that here in the St. Louis community? It just kind of tears me up to see the fear that people who are trying to find life in this country or dealing with and living with. So any experience with any of that here?
I specifically think when that first started happening, there was some negative comments on the news about Haitians. And there's a family that we've grown really close to, and they have 2 children that are brilliant and are part of Word of Life Elementary School and on scholarship through CFNA and other families supporting them. These 2 kids know multiple languages and are reading at 7th and 8th grade levels, have been in our tutoring program 2 years, and now the older child who's in 4th grade is tutoring kindergartners and 1st graders. This is an amazing family. They were terrified, and the mom is still terrified. She was going to buy a house in January or February, but cut that decision just because she was in fear, and she was having the kids wear their identification on them at all times, and very, very nervous for them. And so we prayed a lot. We met together 3 or 4 times over a month just to pray, and that just God would bring peace. So that's my.
Well, to add to that, yes, there's a lot of fear among the refugee community, especially with regards to the ICE situation, or for that matter, what the administration has been putting out, especially for asylum seekers. That is a big issue currently, and for Afghan refugees, also the ones who came in 2021 because of the crisis and all that. There has been a lot of discussion about re-interviewing them and making sure that these are all valid refugees, because the Trump administration currently feels that the previous Biden administration just got people in without properly vetting people and all that. So Romans 13, right? We believe that that the people elect their leaders, and they choose the course of action for the country. This is a country of rules and regulations. So whatever has to happen will happen according to the administration, and they do the things that are necessary to keep the country safe. But one of the main things about immigration, what I feel is that, and what we hear is that there are 2 lenses. Again, Sir was talking about the Lutheran lens or the faith lens. There are 2 lenses that we need to be aware of. One is the political lens with the administration, with which the administration will look at things. But then there's also the human experience lens as well, and that's where probably the faith communities like us come in, because we look at people from the perspective of human experience, what they've gone through, what their struggles are, what their needs are. A ministry like CFNA is basically looking at it from the perspective purely of ministry. We are not built as an organization that has the capacity to take on advocacy issues. We do not have legal people on staff. I have a law degree, but that's from India. It's of no use here, so we'll forget about that. But the thing is that the political lens and the enforcement, ICE is an enforcement agency, so those kind of things will be defined by administrations. Today it's Trump, tomorrow it might be Biden, third day it might be somebody else. But so we really have to be calm and patient about what is happening on that end. For us, as a faith community, as an organization that represents the ministry of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, basically it is about serving people and connecting with them in ways that bring glory to God and follow His command. So that's where we are. I think there's a lot of angst within the refugee communities, of course, because of all these enforcement things that are happening. But at the same time, it seems also there are a lot of refugee service organizations out there in St. Louis itself. And so among them, the conversation has been, okay, let's hold on, let's be calm. 90 days for USCIS to decide who has to be re-interviewed, how it has to happen, and all those things. So those discussions are happening at that level. We are probably away from it. But do we see people hurting and fearful? Yes, as ma'am rightly pointed out. But at the same time, we show the compassion of Christ and we do serve people. We are not built for that capacity to kind of help people with these kind of needs. But what we can do is we refer people to those places where they can seek the help that they need. So that's the best that we can do right now, and that's where we are.
Very good. Doug, any thoughts in that regard?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, and my daughter-in-law in Chicago is an international student coordinator for DePaul University. I mean, she's one of 5 or 6 people. She has under her area of concern about 600 students who are here with student visas to study at DePaul University. So I've had a lot of conversations with her about it, but it's true there is a lot of fear, and I think you know, it's really hard to say. The problem is partly the news media, and I'm not saying that there's nothing real going on or anything, but we all have to realize that the news media's purpose is to sell ads and to get you to watch the program so that they'll sell more ads. And the way they do that is to sensationalize everything. And it just really has, I think, caused, especially now with social media, it's caused a more of a polarization where people can listen to what they want to listen to. You know, and they can, because my daughter-in-law has a very different opinion about this whole matter, even than I do, you know, because she's just so, she listens to one side, you know, and I kind of just try not to get overly influenced by any side. But I think that this is a concern. I don't know what we can do about it. I appreciate the fact that we have within our church body here in St. Louis an organization like Christian Friends of New Americans, and people like Stanish and Amy and others who are just going about this ministry no matter what, you know, and still serving these folks, the stranger among us, doing what we are called to do as Christians. And as Christians, we're called, you know, kind of, we talked about 2 lenses, but we've kind of got 2, you know, God rules his kingdom really in 2 ways, and that is, one way is what we call the kingdom of the left, what has to do with the civil rules and, you know, everything in place for society, the government, and then the kingdom of the right, which is the power there is not the sword, but God's word. And that's what we're working with there, is God's word, to reach people in their hearts, you know, with the gospel of Jesus Christ, to demonstrate the love of Christ. I mean, we have a lot of people that are served by Christian Friends of New Americans that are not Christian. Maybe they never will become a real Christian believer, we don't know, but they are seeing the love of Christ demonstrated to them through this ministry of people helping them with what they need, and it's just incredible. I have been on the board for a few years. I'm not, you know, I'm very humbled by that opportunity, but I don't really I'm not as directly involved as, it's amazing. The first Wednesday of the month, the team meets and all of the people come together, not all the people, but the leaders of the various groups, and just to hear about all the things that are being done in the name of our church body here. So, you know, and I think that's what we should be doing. And I think it's a great thing.
Thank you. How about some questions? Yes.
I believe that we've known for a long time that our laws on immigration in this country need fixing. Each government that comes around says we need to do something. Theoretically, the Biden administration had something a few years ago. It was decided not to work on it. Is there anybody in this country who is actually working on real laws that we can use on immigration in the future?
No.
No, I would say no. And, you know, it's really sad because a few years ago that was not necessarily the case. This was an issue. I remember Lutheran Social Services coming to the seminary years ago. I don't know if it was when you were still there, and talking to us during the time with, I don't know, it might have been Obama and Bush, or I can't remember who they were talking about, but they both had laid out plans and they had ideas and thoughts, but nothing really has changed much. And right now, our government is, I hate to say it, it just seems to be so dysfunctional. They're incapable of, I mean, they can't even establish a budget, you know. They just go little bit by little bit, kind of put Band-Aids on it. So I don't know. In my opinion, there's very little being done. There are, I'm sure, people who are thinking about it, but I don't know of any major movements to try to fix the immigration problem.
That's one thing that Republicans and Democrats agree on, that the system is broken in many ways. But it's not a politically advantageous issue to take positions on. And there hasn't been any sort of comprehensive immigration reform done in the United States in many, many years. There have been some attempts, but they never get, full support. And so, if you look at migrants only through the lens of what's happening politically, then you're kind of dealing with something that you have no control over. You know what I mean? As Stanish was saying, governments come and go. They may have different laws or different policies. And so what we can do is we can look at those migrants who are closer to us, if that makes sense, or in our midst, in ways that we can kind of put a human face on an otherwise very complex issue. So in other words, you want to kind of land the plane. If you start talking about immigration laws and policies and stuff, that gets really messy real quick. Then you start putting labels of a whole number of migrants, the Afghans, this or that, which is not very helpful. More helpful is what is CFNA doing in St. Louis with the refugees and migrants in St. Louis, right, who are within their sphere of influence, so that they get to know them, they get to know their stories, they get to know about their fears, and they can better assess what institutions are out there working with refugees that could help in different ways, given their situation. So what I always tell my students is you have to try to put a human face on the issue, and that means you have to make time to listen to the stories of people, rather than the big macro law picture. An example of this, I had a student who was really struggling in class when we were talking about, legal perspectives on migration and that kind of stuff. Comprehensive immigration reform, all of those big terms. And clearly he was not finding this very helpful, this way of speaking. And then he came over to me after class and he said, Dr. Sanchez, what happens is that I have a daughter who's married to an undocumented immigrant. And all of a sudden, I knew what was really bothering him. In other words, this became real. It was about his daughter and his son-in-law. And then he said, and Dr. Sanchez, I'm a grandfather. So they also had a child, you see. So now, how's he going to look at the immigration issue? In terms of whether Congress passed immigration reform or not? No, he's going to be looking at the issue through, this is my daughter, this is my son-in-law, and this is my grandkid, all right? What do I need to do to make sure that they're doing well? Do I need to seek legal advice, Do I need to speak to someone in whatever state they live in to see what sort of potential solutions are there? Sometimes when you talk to people, you find things out that you didn't know. You might find out that a migrant has been a victim of spousal abuse. You may find out that a migrant has been trafficked. There are humanitarian visas that a lawyer can help you apply for, if that's your situation. But you can't get at any of this unless you put a human face on the issue. You have to talk about an actual migrant or refugee and see what's going on, as opposed to the labels that you find in social media or in the news, where a whole bunch of people are told to be this kind of people. Well, that's not very helpful. So the more local you can be, the better.
Mm-hmm. You actually have mentioned this a couple of times, kind of around the edges, that many of the circumstances that immigrants may be facing here in St. Louis as well might have a legal part to their circumstance. And I'm wondering whether you have any legal resources that are either with CFNA or that you can draw on if somebody has a particular question that they need answered regarding legal stuff.
Well, sir, thank you for that question. Yes, we do not have attorneys on our staff, as I pointed out earlier. Of course, on our board we have Mrs. Laura Brink, and also one of our board members, Lisa Holderly's husband, is an attorney too. But they are not immigration lawyers, even though Laura ma'am is working with the immigration office as well. But what we tend to do is we refer them to one of our partner organizations called Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And so that's one of the agencies that we refer our people to. But at the same time, there are also other agencies like St. Francis Community Services has Catholic lawyers, and then another agency which is very popular within the Catholic circles is called CLAM. I do not know all the, it's some community legal, something like that. But there are some really efficient and effective lawyers there. But see, one of the main issues that right now that everybody is facing is they are being inundated with a lot of cases. And so there's only so much that nonprofit organizations like Legal Services of Eastern Missouri and CLAM and St. Francis Community Services can do. So I was in a recent meeting, and these friends were having a tough time stating the obvious, that it's too much. So let's be calm, let's wait. If you can find volunteer lawyers who can come out and help, that would be great. But we are not in a position to take more cases. So that's another reality that people are facing, which adds to the fear that we're talking about over here as well.
Hi, I'm a proud Venezuelan, born and raised Venezuelan immigrant, and also an American now. And me and my husband, we has been involved in a lot of immigrants community, in legal areas, educational, and we all have our political views, or faith also. We have different backgrounds and different opinions, and so the whole country, that we start with that point. We all have our opinions and everything, but we have to find a common ground, because United States needs that. We all agree we need our communities going back to church. I'm so happy with that trend. There are a lot of research saying that more people are coming to church, so we have to use this time to find a way to bring that lens of Luther to see our communities from using the lens of God. So my question is, how can we nowadays use that knowledge to bring that to our churches and our communities? How can we bring that way to see our people, the refugee people, they're not even Christians? How can we share the love in our churches and in our communities, knowing that we have our identity and we have a mission, even when we have our opinion in our political values? But how can we ensure that? Because there are a lot of how we say that, politicians. There are two different opinions in the extreme. How can we come back to common ground and make sure our communities are feel loved and received, but still having our opinions? How can we be brothers and sisters without killing each other? Let's put it that way.
So, ma'am, to clarify the question, if I understood you right, what you're saying is there are different opinions within the church body of people.
Your organization can ensure that people who not necessarily are in the middle, but in their opinions? How can we bring them
Everybody
together?
can have their own opinion, but how can we work
Yeah,
together
either
and
you
for
or
the
you
good
or
of
you or
the
you or
cause?
you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think you do is that you put people in contact with actual refugees. Now they have to deal with an actual person now. That, one thing is to talk about refugees, another thing is to meet a refugee and to have some kind of relationship with them. And I think the more we can create opportunities and spaces for that kind of engagement, then I think you have to be ready to, in some ways, learn that people come before opinions. And there might be common ground in actually caring for someone, even if you are complete disagreement on policy or something like that, So I think the level of engagement where you actually get to meet a person and creating those spaces, and you do that with congregation, I think that helps. It's a way of educating by doing, rather than educating by telling you how to do it. And I think that's sort of what I found compelling in my story with the Delamos and the Schaefers. They weren't talking to me about their opinions on migrants or aliens or refugees. They were simply caring for me as a person in their midst, Yeah. And through the eyes of faith, I was most fundamentally a neighbor whom God has sent in their midst to care for, And I think that sort of brought everybody together. So the more we can put people in situations where you're dealing with actual human beings, I think the more likely we are to put the person before other things. That might be important, but there's something about the blessing and beauty of having someone who is made in God's image right in front of you. And now you have to engage that and hopefully be blessed by that too.
I think too that that's a great point that you're making. I think it's very important, and I think it's another thing that's important is that we, as a church and as a congregation, I guess I'm going to talk about the pastors, for example, become very intentional about this. In other words, don't just assume it's going to happen, by some strange thing. But I mean, the power of the gospel always will change people, and but I think that if churches became more intentional, pastors, when they're talking, become more intentional about what it really means that Christ died for all. That's just an incredible, powerful statement that we can make as Lutherans. He died for all. And, the things we read about in Revelation 7, the people from all languages and nations and, and so forth. So I think if some of the pastors that have been really successful on this, in my opinion, or at least have had an impact, have had to be really intentional. So it was very obvious when you visited their churches, this was being talked about a lot. I mean, almost every single Sunday. Not to, just talked about, not like forced down people's throats against their will, but just mentioned and discussed and reminded. People were reminded of this, of the blessing of this. And it's not just that we should do this, but also we have so much to learn ourselves and so much to gain. I mean, that's what happened to me. I grew up in Minnesota and never had really a whole lot of cross-cultural experience. And then we found ourselves a little over 40 years ago, almost 43 years ago, in Guatemala as a family, learning Spanish, learning the culture there, or trying to at least, doing the best we could. And, then I realized how much that brought for us. You could ask any one of my 5 children and my wife as well, how much this enriched our lives. And so kind of just talking about this is not, being in our own little cocoon isn't helping us grow, really, and it is not helping us see the real, in its full force, the real blessing of the peoples of this earth that God has put here among us.
Well, to add and to build up on what both the sirs said, which is very valid, which is the right way. I believe it's educational, of course. It's also doing things, putting a face, meeting real people, that really changes the perspective of people. Maybe if the churches can intentionally encourage that, that would be really helpful, I'm sure. But at the same time, we also need to recognize that for the people who really feel that this is a strong issue and they want to put on a political lens, no matter how much faith talk you do, you have to be realistic that it might not really cut eyes with them. But that's why we are all sinners, right? We come to the Lord only because of grace. But I feel that one of the things intentionally we could really highlight is also that life is not easy. It's a paradox, using the Lutheran terminology in many ways. If there's Romans 13, there's also Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 10, love for stranger, or Matthew 25, do to the strangers, what you've done to the stranger, you've done to me. And so those kind of educational pieces along with the doing and really engaging with people is the best way, but also recognizing that not everybody is going to be on board completely. We also need to probably be ready to accept that.
Thank you. I appreciate everything you all are sharing on the mission work of Christian Friends of New Americans. My question is about the immigrants in our community, their perception of a Christian organization and maybe their level of trust. And I bring that up in light of a large part of the evangelical Christian church have aligned themselves with our current president's policies. And so to people who are outside of the church, I think the nuance is lost when they hear, for example, all Somalians are garbage. People outside of the church or outside of places like this might just be led to think that that's just what those Christians believe about us. You know what I'm saying? Like that that's kind of the banner that those on the outside might gain as a perception. And I wonder how that affects, as you reach out to people, is there a little fear or mistrust of a Christian organization, and what are you really standing for, or is that easily diffused by just conversation and showing them maybe a different perspective on each individual's dignity?
Yeah, I feel that there is definitely going to be a little bit of an impact because of the conversation and what is out there, and the perception that all Christians are probably kind of adhering to what is being put out by the administration, or that all Christians are supportive of what is being said by the administration, mainly because we are supporting this administration or whatever. But what we can control is probably our show of love and service to our refugee immigrant friends. And I feel that at least at CFNA, one of the things is that we've been around for 20, 25 years. We have been doing this not yesterday or today. We have been doing this for quite some time. There's a lot of social capital out there among the people whom we have served. And they know us, and they have seen the people who come out and serve. And so it's not going to be wishy-washed away just because one comment came out from somebody who is the president, yes, of course, but still, or some other big shot in the administration. They are going to carry on face value what we have been, what is our record, what have we historically done. And so thank you to the Buckmans and to many other people who kind of started the ministry. It has that tradition has continued at CFNA. We still have a lot of that social capital within the communities, whether it's Somalians or Sudanese or Nepali or Eritreans, Ethiopians. And even today when friends like you come out and volunteer at CFNA, the people see that. So by God's grace, that's the best that we can control and manage. We cannot change perceptions overnight, of course, but people will see Matthew 5:16, right? Let the light shine and let them know the Father and His glory. So that's exactly what you and I are doing. We are called to do the same thing, and we go out in faith and serve our neighbor and pray that people will see the light of Christ that shines in us, and that is going to create definitely perception change if there is a wrong perception created at this present time. That's what I feel.
I was going to say, I see this two-sidedness, not so much in the refugee community that's coming in, but actually in the college students who, we have a lot of college volunteers because working with people marginalized is a really good bonus on your bullet points when you're applying to medical school. So perk is they come and they absolutely fall in love with what we're doing. And they are people from all different backgrounds, all different parts of the states, people that have very differing views from the Christian perspective, who are expecting to not enjoy and not trust what CFNA is doing and what we're asking them and how we're asking them to come as weekly volunteers. These are the people we have longer relationship with because they come every week to our programs. And several of them, some of them in hijabs, some of them, with the dark makeup and just kind of, like really cold originally to our program, will come with a friend because they heard it's a good thing on their transcripts. And then they're like, wow, you guys are doing something different here and we really like what you do. And that's where I'm like, there's some barriers that are being broken because we have to teach a lot of grace and forgiveness among the kids we're working with, which are new concepts to some of our Muslim families, right? Which is just, every time we get to teach that, it's pretty incredible. But we're also preaching it to the people that are volunteering, that have kind of a hardened stance against the Christian church. And so that's been pretty miraculous. Yeah.
Are the bulk of your clients, do they have a Christian background from where they came, or?
Yeah, so I would say right now the bulk of our clients probably are Muslim, but also, but it's almost like 50-50 because if we look at the ethnicities of our friends, there's a sizable Afghan population, a little bit of Syrian population as well, and Eritreans as well, who might be Muslim. Or are Muslim, of course. Whereas on the other side, you also have an equal number of Congolese and Rwandans and Ethiopians and Haitians as well. So they are all Christian. So it's almost like a 50-50 match, I would say right now. Maybe a little slanting towards the Christian side with the percentage that's pointed out, but definitely almost at a balanced point right now. Yeah.
We just had 2 families come in the last month and a half, both from Sudan, both families of 11, one's 11, one's 13. And I was assuming that when they'd meet, it would just be an instant connection, like, oh, my people, But one is a Muslim family and one is a Christian family, and in a country that's at war with each other. But now the kids are playing together. So another thing that's really cool to see. But yeah, but I would agree, we're probably, I think 50-50. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is a question, but anyway, find it. I learned something tonight that I think I knew, but tonight it was completely reaffirmed, and I'm speaking as an immigrant. I cannot create a relationship with somebody in one afternoon. And this is creating a relationship with somebody who's not like me is very countercultural. We are used to touch and go, a cup of coffee, invite for lunch, and let me know if you need me next year. How many years did you spend with your grandparents or parents in Iowa, Pastor Sanchez?
2.5, but then a lifetime afterwards.
There you go. And that's what makes the difference. It cannot, we as Christians, I cannot see myself, now I'm realizing that this is this is what I wanted to share, that I need to be ready to be Christ and to be the church, because Jesus didn't spend much time, but he left the church to spend the time we need to make the connection, to build a real relationship with others that need us. Thank you.
Am I on here? I want to thank our panelists, and please join me in very enlightening and certainly gives us much hope. And I would urge you to go ahead and carry on these conversations. They'll be around for a little bit. Dr. Sanchez has his book, Sculptor Spirit, which I would urge you to pick up and read. He'll even sign it for you. They're in the back at the book table. We do have questionnaires that you each have received when you came in. Please take a moment to fill those out. That's really helpful for us in designing these programs as we go forward. There's a question in the back.
An opportunity, I hope. John, could we ask Amy or Stanish, could you reiterate how, I think maybe some folks here tonight might be interested in helping to support your work. Could you give us a little bit of guidance as to how we can do that financially, human resource-wise, whatever you think?
Okay. Well, that's always a great pitch for us, right? Yeah. But friends, I do not want to take the opportunity to ask for money from everybody. No, that's not the only thing. It is important that in times like this, we all gather together and be there for the Lord's work among the friends who need help as refugees and immigrants in this country. But just wanted to also point out that they bring a lot of vibrancy and value to our country as well. So keeping that in mind, yes, we cherish your prayers. We would love for you to come out and volunteer at CFNA and for various things that we have opportunities for. We have an impact report that is has come out already. So if you probably wanted to visit our website to see how support from even places like Concordia Kirkwood has been impactful in making the ministry of CFNA happen. I would encourage you to kind of take a look at that as well. But of course, finally, wherever possible, if you feel like you want to plug in and support the ministry through your mission dollars, please feel free to kind of visit our website. I think that would be the best place to just go, or send an email, or you can always meet us, talk to the pastors. We are here. Concordia Kirkwood has our founders here as well, so you can always talk to them as well. And also Christy ma'am is there, who is our board member as well. Also, one thing, if I could get the permission to say, I want to say thank you to Concordia Kirkwood also for all the ministry things that you do. Not only for CFNA, you do a lot for various other agencies, and that really shows that the church is vibrant and strong here. I want to say thank you to the pastors, especially the Thanksgiving dinner was a great example of that, and so I wanted to say thank you to Concordia Kirkwood. I see Rebecca Miller sitting right at the back over there, if I'm right. And then my eyesight is not that great, but still I saw her. I want to acknowledge the role that the Lutheran Foundation plays, where MAM works, in facilitating so many ministries here in St. Louis. And the Lutheran Church is really blessed to have them, and especially CFNA has been a big beneficiary of their support. So it is because of agencies like that and churches like you and the volunteers and donors like you and mission-minded people like you that ministries like CFNA exist. So I want to say thank you to all of you.
Thanks. Yes, and of course this whole program has been underwritten by the Lutheran Foundation. We're going to get Matt here one of these days so we can recognize and thank him personally. Thanks again. We join together as we do traditionally with Luther's evening prayer. Together with me. I thank you,
my Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously picked me this day,
and I
pray that you will forgive me all my sins where I have done wrong,
and
graciously keep me this night.
And to your hands I commend my soul, my body and soul, and all things.
Let your holy angel be with me,
that
that the evil foe may have no power over me. Amen.
Go in peace and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.